Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, behind me is my 1991 MR2 Turbo, and today I'll be removing, rebuilding and repainting my front brake calipers. So let's get stuck in. So if you've already watched my inspection video, you will know that I rebuilt the back brake calipers a couple of years ago already. But I see no reason why the front should be any better. In fact, front driver's side is binding a little bit. On the passenger side, it's completely seized on. So let's get to it. After the nightmare removing all the bolts for the bumper and wing, I went straight in with some rust solvent. I loosened the two sloping bolts that hold the caliper on and a banjo bolt for the brake line. You can't see it, but I clamped the brake line further up to stop all the brake fluid from running out. I removed the banjo bolt and let the fluid in the caliper empty out. I tried undoing the bleed nipple, but it had mostly been rounded off and had a lot of corrosion on it. I heated it up with a blowtorch and was able to get it loose in the end with a pipe wrench. I didn't want to remove the nipple, I just wanted it loose for now. Then I removed the caliper bolts and with a little prying was able to remove the caliper. Next, the caliper bracket bolts. Once they had broken loose, they were incredibly hard to turn, so more rust solvent was used. I spent ages loosening and tightening, adding more solvent, just working it down the threads, until eventually they came out with ease. The brake disc was seized to the hub, so some firm taps with a soft hammer soon took care of that. You may now be wondering, if I'm rebuilding and painting the calipers, why is he taking off the brake disc? Now why am I watching him mess around with the dust shield? Maybe he's going to paint that too. That makes sense, right? Yeah, it does, if that was my intention. The truth is I just started down the rabbit hole of removing things and I forgot what the goal of this video was. These shields are pretty far gone in the centre, so I don't think there's any way of saving them. So I've started down the rabbit hole. This dust shield was quite badly corroded, so I was trying to get it off, assuming it was a horseshoe shape, but it's not. There's actually one piece all the way around the hub, so I'm guessing I'd have to take the whole hub off to get it off. So I'm going to leave that for now, because I'm just doing the brake calipers, but I'll have to come back to this at some point. From what I can make out, these are quite rare to find replacements, so I might have to learn how to fabricate. On the plus side, the brake disc so far, seems like that's in really good condition. There's no lip or anything on it, and the pads also seem pretty good. A little bit of meat left on them. The rear ones fell apart as soon as I took them out, but they seem alright for now, so you know, good news. Okay, that's the caliper bracket and caliper off the car. See, the pistons are quite corroded. Hopefully it's just on the top, but I'm gonna have to get these out now. So to do that, I'm just gonna shoot some compressed air down the fluid hole, and hopefully that'll push them out. Just need something to hold there. I don't want to go. You can see they weren't working properly, look. It's only this one that's barely moving. Future Steve here. There was a lot of background noise from outside when I filmed this part. My microphone picked up far more than I thought, so rather than have all that in my video, I'm just going to attempt to voice over this part. As the one piston was completely seized, I pulled the dust boot to one side and was just getting as much WD-40 down there as I could, trying to work my way all the way around the piston. So far it had no effect. Next I tried removing the dust boot. I ended up just pulling pieces off. I'm replacing it anyway, so it didn't matter. Then I continued to use WD-40. So I just repeated this step over and over again, also adding some rust solvent in addition to the WD-40 and spraying it down the brake fluid hole on the back of the caliper so it could get up behind the piston. And still nothing, that piston wasn't going anywhere. With repeated failures, I decided to change my approach. As I couldn't move the piston out, I used a G-clamp to push it all the way in, so it was at least moved out of its seized position. Still no movement with compressed air. With the piston back, however, I could remove the remnants of the dust boot. Once that was done, I could see lots of mud in the piston chamber, so I hit it with some brake clean and used a screwdriver and paper towel to get as much out as I could before returning to my method of rust solvent, WD-40 and compressed air. Did you see that? Finally, some movement. If you're thinking this was a bit of an ordeal, the other caliper was exactly the same. One seized piston and one barely moving. Finally, that seized piston popped out. Moving on to the calipers, I removed the slide pins and boots. Part of the boot is a metal piece which is pressed into the caliper like a bushing. These remained in the caliper, so a hammer and screwdriver was used to get them to pop out. So that's the calipers and brackets out and disassembled. They're covered in grime. It doesn't show up too well on camera, but inside the caliper is completely filthy with mud. I got an ultrasonic cleaner last year and I've never used it, so I thought this was as good a time as any. I filled it with water and a degreaser concentrate. It took about an hour to get the grime off. Might have been quicker with a higher concentration of degreaser, but as this was my first time using it, I'm obviously no expert. Luckily I just left it while I went to have lunch, but it would have been a lot faster just using some brake clean and a cloth. The next step is going to be sandblasting, so before that I stuffed paper towels and tape into the piston chambers. While I will be cleaning them thoroughly afterwards, so it doesn't matter if some blast media got in there, I didn't want to accidentally hit the chamber walls directly and cause some unnecessary damage. I also taped up and reinstalled the bleed nipples and banjo bolts just to stop too much blast media from getting inside. I did the same with the slide pin chambers. A little trick I learnt when taping up shapes is if you place tape over whatever you want to protect, and if there's an edge, gently tap it with a brass hammer and all the excess tape will fall away, giving you the perfect shape. Now on to the sandblasting. It's time to see if my new compressor from my last video was worth buying. Judging from how the brakes are painted, it looks like they were done on the car, as there's no paint on the back or underside. This could mean I potentially have over 30 years worth of corrosion to cut through to get back to bare metal. Looks like my new compressor was worth it. The sandblaster is cutting through the paint and corrosion with ease. I don't know about you, but I find this so satisfying to watch. After sandblasting, I removed the tape and gave all the parts a thorough cleaning with brake clean and then rubbing alcohol. I then taped everything up again just as I did before, so no paint would be getting inside the calipers. On to painting. I started off with high temperature primer. Hitting the calipers from all angles, it took 3 coats to get good overall coverage. Remember, it's better to do more light coats than it is to do fewer heavier coats and getting runs in the paint. Moving on to high temperature colour paint, I'm going with black to match the rear calipers, again 3 coats. Finally, 3 coats of high temperature clear coat. They look lovely, glistening in the evening sun. Okay, I'm just going to clean up the pistons now. Just try to get rid of all this off the sides. I don't think there's any serious pitting in any of them, so they should be okay to be reused. So I'm just going to start out with some 600 grit. Give it a light rub. It's a little bit pitted around the end, but that's not really the bit that goes in and out of the chamber. So I might just treat that rust quickly. Well, they're mostly cleaned up. The worst bits are these parts, which are always exposed to the outside. So I think what I'm going to do is just soak them in some evapor rust for a little while, just to get the worst of the corrosion off, and we'll see what we're left with. Okay. Right, now they've been in there for a while. You see there's still a little bit of, there's still some pitting around the end of the piston, but this is just the bit that presses onto the brake pad. It's not, that doesn't go into the actual caliper itself, so that should be okay. Though I think there's still some rust inside, so I'm just going to tip all these over and just put some evapor rust in there just to stop it from getting any worse. Okay, so I've got a brake rebuild kit with all the seals and everything I need. So we'll start off with the caliper brackets and just replace these little rubber boots. Get them out. There we go, okay. I'll just take off the tape I put on there for when I painted. There we go. So, I don't know how well you can see this. All we have to do is just hit this onto there, more or less goes in by itself. So just take a socket, which is the same diameter as the metal part. Just place it over the top. Give it a whack with a hammer. Not quite in yet. There we go, that's one. 4 more to go. Okay, so my rebuild kit come with some new hardware. Oh, brilliant. Two more rubber bits for the end here. See? I'm not sure why I wasn't talking through what I'm doing here. Before inserting the new slide pins, I'm covering them in silicone grease, which will repel any water that might find its way in. If you're lucky like me, when you press a slide pin in, the boot will pop over the end of the slide pin. Okay, now them pistons are done, we can rebuild the calipers. This is the worst one. I don't know if this is going to show up. There is some pitting on there. I'm hoping that's going to be alright. I mean, worst case scenario, I have to pull them all apart again, but most of them have come out perfectly okay. See, just a tiny bit on this one. And this one looks great as well, so I'm going to put one slightly pitted one and one good one in each cylinder. That might be a mistake, because if they do cause problems, I'll have to do this to both calipers again, but we'll see how it goes. I'm rambling. Right, so we're going to take our freshly painted caliper, take the bleed nipple and the banjo bolt out. I don't need them, I've got two new ones to put in, so that's why I just covered them in tape and put them in the holes. And get all the paper out of the piston chambers. That's one. Two. Okay. Just check inside as best you can. Just make sure there's no debris or anything in there. So you don't want, if you sandblasted them, so you don't want any pieces of blast media left. You didn't have to sandblast them, you could have, used a wire wheel or some sandpaper or something, but I've got it, so I used it. It does make life a bit easier. So I'm just going to give the chambers a little clean quickly, just with some brake clean. Get a little bit of muck in there. Clean as you can. Take your time. Can never be too clean. So you don't want all this mixing with fresh brake fluid. Especially after all our hard work rebuilding them. So just keep going and going until it's completely clean in there. Lovely. So we're going to take our seal, and that goes on. Get light in there. That goes on in the innermost groove. Okay. Now, for me personally, the best way to do it was to make like a heart shape, push it into the groove, and then just slowly work work this out until it's all seated in there, kind of like this. Trouble is, you haven't got enough hands to do it and angle it for my camera. Oh, if only I had a friend to help me. This in on itself. Okay. Oh, dear. Now it's popped most of the way in. You can see it's just that little bit that's not in. So all I'm going to do is put pressure either side of that and sort of just press on the ring just halfway around from where it is, and that will shrink. Just press it around. Work it around. Eventually you'll be left with just a small bump, but if you push on it the whole thing will seat correctly. Just like that, if you can see in there. Okay, let's reassemble the brake caliper, or the rest of it rather. Little tip, if you don't want to scratch your paint job and stuff, just put a little bit of tape over some of the edges so you don't scrape it. It don't matter if you do scrape it, but you know, if you're fussy about stuff like that, I mean, you won't see any of this once the car's all back together anyway, but you know, you did paint it, so might as well protect it. Okay, so now we've got to get the pistons back into their holes, chambers, pots, whatever you want to call them. So to do that, we also need to put in the rubber boot around it, you know, stop dust and stuff getting in. There are two ways you can do it. You can either put the boot on the piston, put the piston in, and then put the lock and collar in around it, which is very fiddly. That might be the proper way to do it, but the way I do it is to put the boot in first, lock it in with the clip, then push the piston through it and in. It works for me. Obviously you're free to do whatever you want to do. Okay, so we take our boot, want this out a bit here. This needs to be facing outwards. So you can get your ring in. The ring will sit, a little torch, in this first big groove in here. If you can see that. That's what holds the boot in. So here we go. Just be careful with the ends. You don't want them, poke through the rubber. Otherwise your brakes aren't going to last very long. Go get that started as far round as we can, about halfway round. How can I get this on camera? Try it that way. Very hard to do upside down. Excuse me, for the last bit, I'll just pull the sort of lip of the boot down just so I'm left with this outer bit. Very carefully take a screwdriver. So I'm not pushing in with it, I'm only using a screwdriver to pull it sideways and just use my finger to push it in. There we go, that's the boot. And locked in. Right now, still see that first seal we put in. Just take a little bit of like fluid on your finger, just rub it around the edge of that seal. Don't have to be a lot. This is important. Wipe it off, yeah. Wipe with your finger. You don't want slippery fingers for this. It makes it harder. Now we'll go to slide the piston through the boot and into the chamber. Now if for some reason you're really struggling to get the piston in. You can put these in the freezer and freeze them. It should contract the metal ever so slightly, just to make it fractionally smaller. Personally, I've never had to do it, but I see a lot of people on the internet do it that way. So if it works for you, by all means, go for it. So this is going to be very fiddly with the camera. So pull the inner part of the boot out. Just try and slide it around the piston. Hardest part is getting it around the bottom, because you can't, so you haven't got much access. Once it's around the bottom, the top is quite easy. Okay, let's try again. Okay. Okay, so once it's around, just work it up until the inside ring is in the groove. It's okay to start pushing the piston in a little way, but just don't push it all the way in until you've got it all in the groove like this. Otherwise, you might push the boot in with it. Right, that's all around. And if you're lucky, like I am, it'll just push in. There we go. It's in. Okay. One more to go. Well, that's the rebuild complete, and I think they look fantastic. Obviously, they need to go back on the car and the brake system needs bleeding, but I'm going to do that another time. I wish I had the foresight to film it when I rebuilt the rear brake calipers, as you have all the handbrake mechanism and everything to do as well. I mean, if you want to see that, I could always take them off the car and dismantle them and reassemble. Let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in watching. The reason I'm not going to put the calipers back on just yet is the same reason as what happened when I removed the front bumper to reveal that corroded crash bar. Now I've been looking at that corroded dust shield and all the rust on the suspension components. It's making me want to do something about it now. Should I try and clean it all up now, or should I just leave it? I'm not sure in its current state whether it'll be adjustable enough if I ever took it in for an alignment. What would you do? Let me know in the comments below. But until next time, take care.